It was a Tuesday afternoon when my son Matthew called. I was at the kitchen table, folding laundry and listening to the old radio hum softly in the background. It's the kind of ordinary day that felt slower with age. I saw his name flash on the screen and answered quickly, thinking maybe he was calling to ask if I could bring my famous sweet potato casserole again this year. Thanksgiving was coming up. Double quotes, "Hey Mom," he said. His tone was already different. Lighter, practiced. "Hi, sweetheart. I was just thinking of you. You and Brittany coming over Saturday to get the turkey ready?" I asked, smiling like I always did when talking to him. He hesitated. "Actually, that's why I'm calling." It's when my stomach dropped. "I could feel it before," he said. Another word, Brittany's parents are coming into town this year from Phoenix. And, well, they've never really had a traditional Thanksgiving, and Brittany really wants to make it special for them. Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. He didn't say it yet, but I knew what was coming. So we thought we'd just do something small this year. No, just her family. Keep it simple. I didn't respond right away. I felt the laundry in my hands, still damp, slip into my lap. "I see," I said, steadying my voice. "So you won't need me there." There was silence. "It's just a beat too long." "Then, yeah, we'll definitely FaceTime you." FaceTime, that's what I was reduced to. A digital window from the corner of their dining room. My hands tightened. "On the towel." "Sure, of course," I said. I could hear the relief in his voice. "Thanks, Mom. We'll still do Christmas like usual." I didn't say anything else. I waited for him to hang up, which he did after a rushed "love you." The house felt different after the call, too. I went back to folding laundry, but everything I touched felt pointless. The dish rags, the pillowcases, it was all habit now, motions without meaning. That night, I microwaved some chicken and ate it alone at the same table where I used to host 12 people at once. Brittany had called my dining style outdated once, said I used too many dishes. That Thursday morning, I still woke up early. Out of habit, I baked a pie. Pumpkin, just like I used to. The smell filled the kitchen, and for a moment it almost felt like a real holiday. I set the table with the faded orange placemats, even put out the gravy boat nobody ever wanted. Cut one slice of pie and sat down at the head of the table, my seat. The house was quiet, except for the clicking of the old wall clock. I took a bite. It tasted just like it always had. But it didn't feel the same. The seat across from me where Matthew used to sit, where he carved the turkey as a teenager, it stayed empty. That afternoon, I opened Facebook. Told myself not to, but I did. The first thing that popped up was Brittany's post. Grateful for family. Grateful for love. Grateful for this beautiful home. Attached was a photo. Everyone sitting around my dining room table, Brittany's parents, her sister. Even her sister's husband, who I knew Matthew didn't like. They all smiled at the camera with glasses of wine in their hands. The tablecloth was mine. The candlesticks were mine. Even the serving dish with the turkey, the one I bought from that flea market in Georgia, was there. And I wasn't. I zoomed in on the background. The photo had been taken in my old house. It's the one I signed over to them 2 years after my husband passed, when Brittany said they needed more space to start a family. They never started one. I clicked on Brittany's page and scrolled. Another. Photo dad carving the turkey. Underneath, Matthew was slicing into a roasted bird with a big smile on his face. Her dad. The caption hit me harder than it should have. They'd replaced me like it meant nothing. Later that night, sat in my bedroom with the pie still sitting on the counter uneaten. I walked to my filing cabinet in the hallway, pulled out the dusty blue folder I hadn't opened in nearly 3 years. The one labeled Property Transfer -18 Maple Avenue. I turned page after page until I saw it. Grantor retains revocation rights under Discretionary Clause 7B. My name was still listed as the ultimate authority on the deed. They thought I gave it away. They didn't know I had protected myself just in case, because part of me never fully trusted Brittany's sweetness. Always felt curated. I remembered the way she looked around my living room the first time. She visited. "Wow," she said with a smile that never reached her eyes. So many antiques, like the whole house was a museum. That night, after they left, Matthew texted me saying, maybe we could help update the place. Brittany has some ideas. I should have known back then. I picked up the phone and called Marlene, the lawyer who helped me draft the transfer documents. I need to revoke the property rights, I said. I want to put the house back under my name. No notice, no discussion. Just quietly, there was a pause on her end. It's within your rights, Elaine. Do you want me to initiate it tomorrow? I didn't even blink. Yes. By Friday morning, the process had already begun, quietly, legally, without a word. They had my table, my pie, my home. But I still had my name, and I wasn't going to be erased that easily. It was the Monday after Thanksgiving when I first heard from them. Again, I had just finished washing the few dishes I used that weekend. A single plate, a single fork, the same coffee mug 3 days in a row. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a message from Brittany. Hope you had a peaceful Thanksgiving. Let's get together soon for a post-holiday catch-up. She always used that fake sweet tone. Always a smiley face, always pretending everything was warm and friendly. Like I was a neighbor, not the woman who raised the man she married. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened Facebook again. I had told myself I wouldn't. But something in me needed to see if it had really happened the way I remembered. Brittany had posted an entire album. Our cozy holiday at home. There were 27 pictures. There was a group shot of everyone at the table. The one I bought 20 years ago, Brittany's father carving the turkey. Her mother holding a bowl of mashed potatoes I recognized, because it was my old serving dish. Brittany and her sister posing in front of the fireplace, where I used to hang Matthew's stocking. Even their dog was there, sitting where my husband used to sit every Christmas morning to hand out gifts. And there, in the background of several pictures, was the hutch I refinished with my late husband. He spent a week sanding and staining that wood with his own hands. He used to hold our wedding china. Now Brittany had filled it with white minimalist plates she ordered online. The comments rolled in under every photo. Beautiful family. Gorgeous home, looks like something out of a magazine. Brittany, you always make everything look perfect. And there was my son, my Matthew, commenting under each one with hearts and smiley faces. I kept scrolling even though it hurt. I didn't know why I did that to myself. Maybe I needed the pain to feel real, to remind myself I wasn't imagining any of this. Then I saw it. A video to Brittany had posted a short clip. It's just 15 seconds. She was filming from the dining room doorway. Her voice was cheerful. Everyone's here, the turkey's carved, the table is set. So grateful for love and this beautiful house. As the camera panned across the room, I saw everything. The rug I had brought back from Charleston, the framed photo of Matthew and my husband still on the bookshelf, but partially blocked now by a decorative plant Brittany had stuck in front of it. The mantel was filled with white candles and pine cones instead of the garland I used to hang every year with. Matthew, but what caught me most was what wasn't there. Not one single photo of me. Not on the walls, not on the bookshelf, not on the refrigerator. It was like I never existed. I closed the app and sat at the table. My hands were cold. I didn't cry. I had cried enough over the years. After my husband died, after I gave them the house, after each phone call that went unanswered for days, I had gotten used to the ache. But this was different. This was erasure. They weren't just excluding me now. They were replacing me. I stood up and walked into my small guest room, the one I used for crafts now that no one came to stay overnight. In the closet was a box of documents I hadn't touched since I'd moved to this smaller apartment. I pulled it down and opened it on the floor. There were old tax records, insurance forms, and buried underneath a copy of the deed transfer I had signed almost 6 years ago. Transfer of title, 18 Maple Avenue at the time. I thought I was doing something generous. Matthew had just gotten married, and Brittany said they didn't have the credit to buy a home. It would mean the world to us if we could just stay in the family house, she said. We keep everything exactly the way you had it. It felt right back then. I didn't want to live in that big house alone after my husband passed. It had too many echoes, too many memories. I thought if I gave it to Matthew, at least a piece of me would still live there. I didn't give it to him completely, just transferred the title with a retain clause. That allowed me to revoke ownership if I ever needed to. My lawyer at the time, Marlene, had gently suggested I include it. You never know, Elaine, she said. Things change. People change. I had insisted it wasn't necessary, but Marlene had been firm. Just humor me, she said. Now I understood why. I picked up the phone and called her again. Marlene, it's Elaine, about the house. She didn't sound surprised. I thought I might hear from you after the holidays, she said. I explained everything I had seen, Not just the social media posts, but the way they had erased me from that house. The way they used my things and called it theirs. The way. Brittany referred to her father as dad in a house I had built with my husband. I want it reversed, I said. Quietly, legally, no confrontation. I don't even want them to know yet. Marlene was calm. The deed is still in the trust. Your authority is intact. I'll start the paperwork this week. If you're not doing anything wrong, Elaine, you're just exercising your rights. That night, I didn't sleep much. I sat in the living room, staring at the ceiling fan. The air was still. My apartment was quiet, cleaner than the house had ever been, but it never felt like home. It was a temporary space, one I moved into when I thought I was making room for my son to build a family. But they weren't building a family, they were building a version of life where I didn't exist. 3 days later, Arlene called to confirm the filing had gone through. You're now the sole holder of the deed, she said. They no longer have any legal right to sell, rent, or modify the property. Will they be notified? I asked. Not yet, unless they try to refinance or list the property. But for now, it's yours again. I didn't say anything. I just nodded, even though she couldn't see me. That night, I printed one of the photos Brittany posted. The one of everyone smiling around my old table. I folded it twice, and tucked it into the back of the folder where the new deed now lived. They could have the photos, the holiday, the performance, but the house, that was mine again, and they didn't even know it yet. It was almost 2 weeks after Thanksgiving when Brittany called. Not texted, called. I saw her name on the screen and just stared at it for a moment, wondering what had prompted this sudden shift from cheerful emojis and social media comments to an actual phone call. I picked up. Hi, Elaine, she said, her voice bright like always. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. I was sitting at the table with a mug of tea and a half-finished crossword puzzle. No, it's fine, I said, keeping my tone neutral. What's going on? She laughed softly. Well, I know this might sound silly, but we've been talking about maybe redoing the kitchen. You know, a modern look. Something more open. The cabinets are kind of dated, and we were thinking of knocking down the wall that divides the dining area. I didn't respond right away. She continued. So I called the bank to start the pre-approval process for a renovation loan, and they said there was some confusion. They said there's a hold on the deed, that it's been pulled back into a trust under your name. She said it like it was a mystery. Like she hadn't just called to talk about renovations for a house that she assumed was fully hers. That's correct, said plainly. There was a pause. I'm sorry, I don't understand. I didn't sign over the property fully. I retained revocation rights when I transferred it. It was a legal safety net. The house was placed in a revocable trust. I exercised that clause earlier this month. I could hear her breathing change on the other end. More shallow, quieter. But you gifted us the house. No, I said, not raising my voice. I let you live in the house. I allowed you and Matthew to build a life there. That was the understanding, that it would remain part of our family. But I never surrendered ownership entirely. That's why the clause existed, and now I've taken it back. She was silent for a few seconds, then a nervous laugh. Elaine, this is all so confusing. Surely we can talk about this. I mean, we've made changes, invested time and money. I cut her off. Then perhaps you shouldn't have erased me from the house I built. Silence. I saw the photos, Brittany. The video. The captions. The part where you called your father dad in the house where I raised Matthew. The house where I lived with my husband for 38 years. It's the same room where I watched my son open presents every Christmas morning. And not once was I mentioned. She started to speak, but I didn't stop. You used my furniture, my silverware, my dining table. And then told me I wasn't needed because your family was visiting. I was part of that family, but clearly I was the inconvenient part. Finally, she said, you're being unfair. I didn't reply. She added, Matthew had nothing to do with that decision. Didn't he? I asked, my voice firmer now. Because he didn't call. He didn't check on me. He let you send the message. He watched you post those pictures. And he didn't even think to include me in a single one. Said, her tone shifting to something colder, more clipped. We didn't mean any harm, and now we have a problem, Elaine. A serious one. Because now the house is legally blocked, and we have plans. I'm sure you do, I interrupted. But those plans no longer involve my house. I hung up before she could respond. That evening, Matthew called. Unlike Brittany, he didn't. Waste time pretending. Mom, he said. What the hell is going on? I revoked the deed, I said. The property is mine again. He was quiet for a moment. Why would you do that? Because I was tired of being treated like a stranger in my own life, I replied. You didn't even call me on Thanksgiving, Matthew. You didn't come by. You didn't invite me. You let your wife tell me I wasn't needed. He exhaled. Loudly. It wasn't like that. No, I asked. Then what was it? Brittany's family came from out of town. There was limited space. There was plenty of space when I hosted 20 people year after year, I said. Somehow, we always made it work. He didn't respond. I continued. And now you're surprised I took back the house that you only wanted when it was convenient. Mom, we've been living there for almost 5 years. And I let that happen, I said. But I also protected myself. I had a clause written in. You never owned the house. I just didn't push the issue until now. This isn't how families treat each other, he said quietly. No, I replied, feeling the weight of those words. It isn't. He hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after that. No tea, no TV. Just silence. That night, I opened a drawer and pulled out the thick envelope my husband had left me when he passed. Inside were the updated estate documents, our wills, the trust details, and a short handwritten note. It was written in his careful handwriting. If they forget who you are, Elaine, remind them, not with words, but with action. You kept this family together for decades. Don't let anyone pretend otherwise. I hadn't looked at that letter in years, but now it felt like the only thing in the house that made any sense. The next day, I called Marlene again. I want to update my will, I said. We're going to change the beneficiaries. If Matthew's name is on anything, remove it. She didn't sound surprised. I'll draw up the draft this week. You want to include anyone else? Yes, I said. My niece, Carolyn. She's been checking on me every week. She visits without asking for anything. Give her the cabin in Maine and the savings account. She's the only one who's acted like family. Understood? As I hung up, I didn't feel triumphant. Didn't feel angry. I felt clear. Everything I had built was mine again. They had erased me from their table, from their photos, from their words, so I erased them from my will. Not out of revenge. It's out of reason. They chose their version of family. Now I was choosing mine. By the following week, I had gone nearly 8 full days without hearing a word from either Brittany or Matthew. The silence was expected, but still strange. For years, I had been the one holding things together, checking in, reminding them of birthdays, mailing, anniversary cards they never remembered to reply to. Okay, now the roles were reversed, but they didn't seem to notice. Okay, or maybe they just didn't care anymore. I spent most of the week cleaning out old boxes from my apartment. Not because I had plans to move, but because the energy in me had shifted. I was no longer waiting for someone to include me. I was starting to organize things in case I decided to reclaim more than just a piece of paper. On Thursday afternoon, got a knock at my door. I opened it to find Brittany standing there. She was dressed like she had somewhere else to be. Long, beige coat, makeup just a little too perfect for a casual visit. She gave me that polished smile she always wore when things weren't going her way. Elaine, she said brightly. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. You are, I replied plainly. But I suppose you're here anyway. She paused for just a second. Then she stepped inside without asking. I thought maybe we could talk in person, face to face. I didn't offer her tea. I didn't even invite her to sit. I leaned against the counter, waiting. She smiled again, trying to regain control. I think we've all gotten a little carried away. Emotions are high. Situation with the house. I know it's complicated, but I think we can come to an understanding. I folded my arms. She took a deep breath. Matthew and I have invested a lot in that home. Time, money, care. We've made improvements. The roof, the kitchen. We even redid the backyard. We had plans, Elaine. You should have read the paperwork, I said. She blinked. You were living in that house under my trust. I continued. You didn't own it? The clause was clear. You assumed the gift was permanent. It wasn't. Brittany's voice sharpened. You're punishing us. No, I said calmly. I'm correcting a mistake, she scoffed. You know how this is going to look? You're going to appear petty, vindictive, kicking your own son out of the house you gave him. I didn't give it to him. I loaned it. With conditions, which you both broke the moment you decided I wasn't part of your life anymore. That's not true, she said. You excluded yourself. You're always so dramatic. I held up a hand. Don't you dare come into my home and pretend this was my doing. She stood there frozen. You didn't call on Thanksgiving. You told me there wasn't space. Then you filled my house with your family, used my things, and pretended I didn't exist. You posted about your beautiful home like it was something you built. Even called your father dad in a house that doesn't belong to you. She swallowed hard. You're overreacting? No, I said again. I'm acting. It was a long pause. Finally, she sat down at the edge of the chair, her composure beginning to fade. So, what now? You want us to pack up and leave? Didn't say that, I said, but I do want the keys returned. She stared at me. I'm not asking you to leave this week. I'm not interested in creating a scene. But the ownership has reverted. If you want to remain in the house, you can apply to lease it through my lawyer. Fair rent, a formal agreement, like adults. You want us to pay rent? I want you to decide what the house is worth to you, I said. She looked down at her hands. I know you think you've won, she muttered. There's nothing to win, Brittany, I said. This isn't a game. It's a home. One that mattered to me long before you decided to make it your holiday prop. She didn't reply. Instead, she stood up, adjusted her coat, and walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned back. Matthew, we'll never forgive you for this. I met her eyes. Then he'll have to live with that. She left without another word. The next evening, I received a text from Matthew. Was short? You really mean this? I stared at it for a moment, then typed my reply. I really do. He didn't respond. A week later, I got a call from Arlene. Just a heads up, she said. We received a request from Brittany. She wants to see the terms for leasing the house. Does she sound angry? She sounded surprised. Marlene replied, but also defeated. I think they thought you wouldn't follow through. They don't know me at all. No, she said, they don't. That weekend, I drove past the house. Slowly, I didn't stop. I didn't need to. The lights were on. Brittany's SUV was parked outside. There were new curtains in. The windows probably heard doing. But I noticed something else. To dot the big fall wreath I used to hang every year. The one with the gold leaves and orange ribbon was gone, replaced with a small plain one. No color, no warmth, dot fitting, dot the. Next day, I received the formal lease request. It was signed by Matthew, not Brittany, dot. The message was clear, he wanted to stay. But he wasn't going to speak to me. Marlene asked if I wanted to approve the lease. Yes, I said. But month to month, I don't want any long-term commitments. Understood. A few hours later, I received another message from Matthew. No apology. No explanation. Just 2 words. Keys dropped. I checked the front steps of my apartment later that day and saw a small envelope sitting on the mat. Inside were 2 house keys. Wrapped in tissue, no note. I didn't need one. A week after the keys were dropped at my door, I received an email. From Matthew, subject line was vague. We need to talk. I opened it without much hesitation, knowing full well it wouldn't be an apology. It WASN single quotes, "Ty Mom. I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened. Brittany and I were blindsided. We never imagined you would go behind our backs and do something like this. I still don't think it was fair. That said, we've started looking into other options. The lease agreement is not sustainable long term. We have expenses, and it's a difficult time for us financially. I'm not asking for everything to go back to how it was. But I think we can reach a new understanding. Maybe we could sit down and work out a long-term solution that gives us some stability again. Let me know if you're open to that, for the sake of family. Matthew, I read the message twice. Nowhere in that email was there any mention of what they did. Not a word about Thanksgiving. Nothing about excluding me. Not even a hint of recognition for what I had done for them over the years. I didn't reply immediately. I needed to think. That night, I went through a drawer in my bedroom and pulled out a small blue notebook I kept tucked between the towels. I had started it after my husband passed, writing down notes, lists, thoughts, just to keep my mind steady. I flipped through the pages until I found what I was looking for. Every major expense. I had covered for Matthew and Brittany since they moved into the house. I had never intended to tally it up. I wasn't that kind of person. But in moments of confusion, I sometimes wrote things down to keep myself from forgetting the weight of what I'd carried. Roof. Repairs. $8,900 kitchen remodel. They chose the layout. $11,250 backyard fence replacement. $4, 300 water heater installation. $1, 700 property taxes 3 years. $16,200 home insurance paid from my account. $3,600 landscaping and lawn. Care 2 years, $2,800 holiday expenses, decorations. Food, gifts, $6,000 plus total, over $54,000. And that didn't even include the time, effort, and emotional labor. I closed the notebook, then opened my laptop and wrote a response. Matthew, you and Brittany were not blindsided. You were careless. You assumed permanence where there was only permission. You confused comfort with ownership. For years, I let you live in my house rent-free. I paid the taxes. I handled the repairs. I supported your lifestyle. You told me I was no longer needed at Thanksgiving, and I respected your wishes. But respect goes both ways. And when I saw that I had been fully erased from your lives, I made a decision to reclaim what was mine. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to like it. But it was mine to make. You're not being forced to stay in the house. Are free to leave at any time? A lease is an option, not a sentence. I'm not interested in meeting. There is no new understanding to reach. You made your priorities clear. I pressed send without hesitation. The next morning, I had 2 missed calls from Matthew and 1 from Brittany. I didn't answer either of them. Instead, I drove to the house. I parked across the street, not directly in front. I wasn't trying to start anything. I just needed to see it again with my own eyes. From the outside, it looked the same. The lawn was trimmed, the shutters painted, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. Not in the emotional sense. Not in the way I used to feel when I pulled into the driveway after a grocery run, or when I'd see my husband waving from the porch with a cup of coffee in hand. That feeling had been gone for years. I just hadn't let myself notice. A week later, Brittany posted another photo online. It's just a single picture of a moving truck parked in front of the house. No caption, no explanation. But I knew what it meant. They were leaving. 2 days after that, I got a notice from Marlene that the lease had been terminated. I expected to feel vindicated, maybe even smug, but I didn't. What I felt was something closer to emptiness, not regret, not sadness, just the final weight of closure settling in. They were gone. They hadn't said goodbye. I didn't need them to. That Saturday morning, I drove to the property and walked through the front door with my own key. The first time in years I had opened that door without knocking. The house was quiet. Some of the furniture was gone, but most of it had been left behind. The couch was still there. The dining table mine had been pushed to the corner, scratched and nicked. The walls were bare, except for a few small nails. I walked into the kitchen. They had replaced my curtains with something sheer and gray. The fridge was empty, the sink clean. It looked like they had scrubbed the place just enough to not feel guilty. I opened a drawer and found a note folded into a square. No envelope. It was from Matthew, Mom. I wish things hadn't turned out like this, but I understand that maybe we pushed too far. I hope someday you'll forgive us. Maddie read it once, then set it back in the drawer. I didn't take it with me. I went upstairs, checked every room, and opened the windows to let in some air. It smelled dusty and stale, like a house that had been lived in but not loved. When I came back down, I stood in the living room and looked around. I had given them this house in the hope that it would be a home again, that it would carry on a legacy of warmth and tradition. Instead, they used it as a set piece, something to dress up and show off as long as it fit the image Brittany wanted. Now it was back to me, and it felt unfamiliar but manageable that afternoon. I brought over some of my own things, just a few boxes. Books, a quilt I had made during the first winter without my husband, a couple of framed photos that hadn't seen daylight in years. I wasn't moving back, not entirely, but I was reclaiming the space. On my terms and the silence. Inside, it was finally mine again. The first morning, spent alone in the house again, didn't feel the way I thought it would. I had expected a rush of emotion, maybe grief, maybe satisfaction. But instead, it felt more like walking into a room where a clock had just started ticking again. Familiar, steady, and quiet. I made coffee in the old kitchen, using the same machine I had used for over a decade. They hadn't replaced it. It's probably too old-fashioned for Brittany's taste. The cabinet still held some of their mugs, though, matching white ones with minimalist lines. I took them down and placed them all in a box I'd brought. I'd donate them later. I preferred my mismatched floral set, the kind with tiny chips on the rim from years of use. I spent the day in silence. No music, no television, just unpacking small things. Restoring certain spaces, not redecorating, restoring. I pulled the heavy curtains back over the living room windows, the ones Brittany had taken down and stuffed into the hall closet. Rehung the framed photo of Matthew as a boy on the staircase. It's the same one he used to pass every morning on his way to school, holding his cereal bowl with both hands. By mid-afternoon, sat down at the kitchen table and opened a new notepad. At the top of the page, I wrote, "Things that still belong to me." Then I paused. I didn't mean objects. I meant time, memory, control. I set the pen down and went into the dining room. The table was still in place, scratched now, with little dents and scuff marks from years of carelessness. But it was still mine. I ran my hand over it. For years. This was the center of everything: meals, announcements, birthday cakes, tears, arguments, prayers. I had hosted every Thanksgiving here for 30 years. Until Brittany said I wasn't needed anymore, that word "needed" had lived in my chest. Ever since. It wasn't that I had wanted attention, didn't need to be praised, but I had given them everything. And when the time came to choose who sat at that table, they picked everyone else. That was the moment I stopped waiting. Now I was standing. Here again, and this time I was choosing myself. I opened the china cabinet, my real one, not the stripped-down shelves Brittany had replaced it with. Inside were the original plates, the wedding china, still intact. I took out a single setting. One plate, one fork, one knife, one cloth napkin. I set it down in the middle. Of the table, I went into the kitchen, pulled out a small turkey breast I had picked up the day before from the butcher, and placed it in the oven. Not a whole bird, it's just enough for one. While it cooked, I found the old recipe book in the drawer by the fridge. The pages were yellowed and the cover had started to peel. But it still opened to the page I had bookmarked decades ago. Sweet potato. Casserole with pecan topping. I made it without looking at the measurements. Every motion felt. Automatically. I was stitching together something that had come undone a long time ago. When everything was ready, I brought it to the table. One plate, one glass of water, no candles. No centerpiece, just a meal. In my home, on my terms. I sat down and I ate. Not fast, not distracted. I chewed slowly and let myself taste every bite. No one interrupted me. No one asked where the cranberry sauce was or complained about the stuffing being dry. No one pushed my hand away from carving the turkey or offered unsolicited advice. No, one was there, and I didn't feel lonely. I felt steady. After I cleared the table, I washed the plate and left it in the rack to dry. I placed the fork back in. The drawer folded the napkin and returned it to the linen box. I looked around the dining room one more time. The photos were back in their frames. The candles I used to light every Thanksgiving were back on the mantel. The worn-out rug that Brittany once called a busy was back under the table, right where it belonged. It wasn't the house it used to be, but it didn't need to be. I had taken back the pieces that mattered. Late that evening, I got another email from Matthew. No subject line. "Mom, we're settled into a new place. It's smaller, but fine for now. I wish things had ended differently. I know you feel hurt. And maybe you're right too. I hope one day we can talk, really talk, without Brittany, without anger. Just us, if you ever want that. I'll be here." Matthew. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it either. I just closed the laptop and turned off the light. Upstairs, I opened the closet in the master bedroom. Some of my old clothes were still hanging there. Hadn't realized I'd left them behind. I pulled out a cardigan I hadn't worn in years. Smelled like cedar and dust. I slipped it on Dot, then I sat on the edge of the bed, stared out the window. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty, just still. And for the first time in a long time, felt like I belonged somewhere again. Not because someone said I was welcome, but because I had decided that I was.